Hello, everybody. I hope you're okay. I wanted to start off by saying that a couple of days ago, I received a message on Instagram telling me to check out Cole Sprouse's Instagram page. You guys know who Cole Sprouse is, right? From Sweet Life, Zach and Cody, Sweet Life on Deck, and Riverdale. To my knowledge, nothing has been confirmed yet, but it seems like he's been dropping hints of him possibly being cast as Sanji for the One Piece live action series that Netflix is developing. So if you look at his page, you'll find that he's changed his profile icon to a picture of Sanji, and then he's also been uploading pictures that are very intentionally Sanji-like. Again, nothing has been confirmed yet, to my knowledge, but the hints are very, very obvious. It just dawned on me that Cole Sprouse has already lived on a ship on Sweet Life on Deck, like Sanji lived in the Baratier. And then also, Sanji is a quadruplet, right? And Cole Sprouse is a twin. So there's that other connection there. And if the live action Netflix adaptation ever gets to Whole Cake Island, maybe his brother, Dylan Sprouse, can play the Vinsmoke brothers. But let me know what you think.
I really liked the visual composition of the cover page this time. I think it's kind of cool how you have to zoom in twice to understand what's going on there, with Pound showing proof that he was there when the twins were babies. You even see a homie there in the background of the picture as well. And speaking of homies, I didn't see Zeus anywhere in this chapter. Given what happened to him in the last chapter, I thought his absence was pretty noticeable. Anyway, I guess what happened was that Pound walked in with a Dendenmushi wanting to take a picture of his daughters, and then Linden kicked him out. And I hope this is enough proof for Lola and Chiffon to let Pound come aboard. I also don't know why Pound didn't show the girls the locket before they got on the ship and sailed away. I mean, I know why. It's because Oda wanted to be funny and make a gag. And so I really hope that this locket is enough so that we can resolve this. Again, I really do appreciate the visual composition of the page, but overall, I do think that this cover story has overstayed its welcome. There's a small Hyogoro panel in the first page where we see him cutting an axe, and I kind of like it because it shows some Rio sort of flowing from the slash of his sword. I thought that was a nice touch. Then later on we see him fighting alongside some of the Yakuza bosses, going up against drunk fodder. So they want to go up against the Tobiropo, which I fear that will be too much for them. They will be overwhelmed by the Tobiropo, but I think that's kind of the point of this chapter. Like, even the title of this chapter, which is Hyogoro's dialogue later on, is just kind of there to build this false sense of security for the reader. I think Oda does a really good job in this chapter of relaxing the reader. He's trying to fool you into thinking that things are going to be okay, when in reality, like, honestly, I would not be surprised if a tragedy happens very soon.
And on that same note, I find it very telling that Oda did not show the minx in this chapter, because he's essentially interfering with his own momentum. He did a great job building up the hype and the momentum for that fight that's taking place outside, with Nekomamushi saying, like, it's a great night to look at the full moon and all that stuff. And then the next chapter, we barely begin to see the minx transforming some of them, right? And then in this chapter, we don't get to see them at all. So he's just been cutting away from that scene. And I think that is super intentional. I think the reason for why he's not showing that is because, again, he wants us to get comfortable and think, wow, this is looking kind of good for the Alliance. The Alliance really hasn't had anything bad happen to it ever since it got to Onigashima. Like, not really. They haven't really struggled much, so we're already due for some pushback, and I would not be surprised if members of the Alliance start getting defeated left and right. We're probably going to get a shot of the Guardian Minx and the Musketeer Minx in Sulong form, completely demolished, messed up on the battlefield grounds. And then we're going to get a note that says, a couple of minutes ago, and then we're going to see what actually went down in that fight. I can see Oda doing that. Luffy calls Yamato a he in this chapter. He says, Yamato, he is on our side. He's an ally. You can trust him in the official translation. I'm not really sure why then it was that Yamato was introduced. When Yamato first appeared, she was introduced as Kaido's daughter. That's very strange to me. And all I've been saying thus far is that there's a huge difference between a girl who is cosplaying, who is pretending to be Captain America, and a girl who actually sees herself as another gender. Those are two different things. Now, obviously, I don't know Japanese. I have no access to the raw, so I don't know what the original text said. But I do know that pronouns in Japanese work differently than they do in English. There was a chapter not too long ago where Luffy calls Yamato Yama-o, Yamagai, the same thing he calls Law, Tragai, right? And Yamato was upset about that. At the end of the day, to me, the most important thing is what Yamato thinks, like what she or he identifies as. But the problem is that you can't jump into the page and ask Yamato that, right? And so all you can do is read the text on a weekly basis and see what the characters are saying, all right? Now that being said, all right, I do have to say that because Luffy is referring to Yamato as a he, then that means that, to me, Yamato's introduction was very poorly handled. Oda was not clear. He actually was not clear in terms of what we were supposed to make out of Yamato's gender. In the official translation, when Yamato first appears, it says Kaido's daughter, self-stylized Kozuki Oden, making it seem as if this identity thing is a style rather than her actually not identifying as a woman, as her gender. So I do think it was poorly handled. I think Yamato should have been, Oda should have had Yamato be much more specific, just like he had Kiku say, I'm a woman at heart. That's all I needed. And that has to come from Yamato, not from another character. You know, other characters don't get to label who you are, right? So that has to come directly from Yamato. And unfortunately, we didn't get that. And because of that, it just ended up making things more confusing. Again, there is a major, huge difference between a girl who is pretending to cosplay, to roleplay as Captain America versus a girl who actually says, I do not identify as a woman. I identify as a man. Huge, huge difference, all right? Those are two very different things.
Anyway, that whole scene with Yamato really got me thinking about if and when Hiyori is going to show up, simply because she is Momonosuke's real, actual family, and we haven't seen her in Onigashima at all, so maybe she's back at the Flower Capital. But anyway, she does have to show up at some point and make some kind of an entrance, because the citizens of Wano and Kaido's forces all think she's dead.
So Shinobu uses a smokescreen and takes Momonosuke with her to escape because they think Yamato is crazy. And then Brook and Frankie have a brief exchange with Big Mom. And I like how Big Mom refers to Frankie later on in the chapter as Iron Man.
Then Frankie has a Jinbe moment in this chapter. Well, it's actually not a Jinbe moment, because other Straw Hats have said the same thing before. It's just that the way that Frankie says it is very similar to the context and the way that Jinbe says it to Big Mom in Whole Cake Island, where he's like, why should I be intimidated by a mere Yonko if I'm a man who wants to be a part of the future King of the Pirates crew? So it's the same thing, it's just that Frankie hadn't said it, so Oda has used this opportunity for him to say it here. And the Straw Hats mainly say the phrase when they're up against a threat. So for example, Zoro said it in Thriller Bark when he was about to sacrifice himself to Kuma in Luffy's place. Sanji said it to Capone and Zoe when he was being blackmailed to attend Big Mom's tea party. Usopp said it to Miss Merry Christmas in Alabasta when she was telling him that Luffy had died. Nami said it during the fight against Cracker in Whole Cake Island. Chopper says it in Punk Hazard to Mocha after she realizes that her and the rest of the kids are actual test subjects for Caesar. And Brook says it in Saboti Archipelago when the Marines show up to target him and shut down his concert. So the only Straw Hat that hasn't said the phrase is Robin, which makes sense because Robin is the more quiet, reserved member out of the crew. So you can only imagine that when she actually does say it, it'll be because there will be some serious stuff going on in the moment.
3 numbers show up all of a sudden, and they do look, design-wise, they look like characters from that book, Where the Wild Things Are. And I do have to say that the official translation did a poor job at identifying what number 2 of them were. Like, I know the one who's on the left, who's laughing go ki ki ki, that's number 5, because go means 5 in Japanese. But the other 2 are kind of confusing because you read their laughs and it's just Jaki Kiki, Jaki Kiki. So it's almost as if two numbers have the same laugh, which makes no sense to me because each number should have their own distinctive laugh that is representative of the number that they are, right? Now, I will say that the number on the right, the one that kind of looks like a chupacabra with the horns down, we've actually seen his silhouette before. We saw him in chapter 977, and in that scene, I believe that he's laughing something like Ju Kiki, Ju Kiki. So the Ju to me means 10, right? Kind of like the Juby. So he could be the 10, but yeah, it was not made clear in the official translation. And all that needed to be done was just to write a note, right? Just a small little note explaining which of the numbers is which. But no, we didn't get that. So the official translation dropped the ball with that. That being said, I read another translation that had the short one in the middle as number 4. So I guess for the time being, I'll just go with that. That the one that Frankie takes out is number 4. Now, because Frankie got distracted with the numbers and decided to attack one of them, Big Mom sneaks up behind Frankie and is about to attack him with Napoleon. So I'm guessing that she was about to use a Spear of Elbaf attack, which probably would have been devastating. But then Jinbe steps in, catching Big Mom with a hold, and then Robin spins her away. And here's my take on this, right? Because I really am mixed. I do have conflicting feelings about this. On one hand, I do think a lot of us are just not okay with the way that Oda treats Big Mom as a joke sometimes. Simply because her being treated like this makes light of a situation that should be more serious and should also be used to up the stakes of the story. All right, let's do a thought experiment here. Imagine Jinbe getting Whitebeard or Shanks into that same hold and then Robin spinning them away. That scene would straight up read like something out of Looney Tunes. That is some Looney Tune level type of portrayal. That being said, there are some things that I want to give Oda credit for, so here they are. First of all, I really appreciate the fact that there was no amnesia, that Big Mom didn't forget who she was after Frankie hit her in the head with the motorcycle. So I do have to give credit where credit is due. I thought that was good. I also liked the fact that it was actually Jinbe, the one who flipped Big Mom, because not only is Jinbe a martial arts specialist, but we've actually seen him. It's been shown already that he's able to push Big Mom away. So that was kind of pre-established. You can count that as foreshadowing for this. Also, Jinbe's fighting style, Fishman Karate and all that stuff, utilizes techniques that for the most part end up using the opponent's own weight against them, which is exactly what he does in this chapter with Big Mom, right? Using Big Mom's tremendous weight to his advantage. Also, to me, Jinbe is second Yonko Commander level. I know that's debatable, but to me, he's like second Yonko Commander level, so I could see him being able to pull this off. So the problem has nothing to do with Jinbe or Robin's feats in this scene, but it does have to do with Big Mom's portrayal as a character and her being treated as a gag for comedic relief. But anyway, Jinbe does say that she'll be back and she'll be even more trouble. So again, what they did was just buy time, because again, it's been made absolutely clear that Luffy cannot go up against two Yonko in his current state and win. And Luffy has even said that he'll deal with Big Mom only after he's dealt with Kaido. So it seems like Oda is very, very consistent and has made it very clear that he's sticking to that statement, to that format. I also like how as Big Mom is rolling away, she says, "I'm gonna kill you for what you did to my fleet, Jinbe." So you can only imagine that Jinbe and the rest of the Fishman pirates ended up destroying a lot of Big Mom's tart ships, just like Jinbe destroyed some of the Beast Pirate ships when he first arrived in Wano. Oh, and by the way, the move that Robin uses on Big Mom is Delphinium, which is the same move that she used back in Enies Lobby to roll Luffy away and throw him into the ocean, and then she also used it during her fight in Skypiea versus Yama. And Yama was pretty big, he was pretty much like a ball, so it's kind of like the same thing. It's been pre-established that she can do this. So the fact that she pulls the same thing here, I think works perfectly. Again, the problem is not Jinbe or Robin's feats. The problem is Big Mom's portrayal, especially when you compare the way that she is constantly treated in comparison to the other Yonko. Also, the homie army that she created not too long ago out of old household items, the Tsukumogami, if you will, have been essentially pretty useless thus far. I mean, in this chapter, there's one panel of her grabbing one of the homies, a three-eyed homie there. But aside from that, like, they don't appear in this chapter. She hasn't really used them. So I hope that Oda is saving those homies to do something cool with them later. But they just kind of disappear in this chapter. Another character that suddenly disappeared is Ulti. We didn't see her in this chapter either. And then Carrot is in the background of a lot of panels, but then by the end, by the final shot of the chapter, she's not there. So it's like she probably saw that that was like a Straw Hat only moment, and then she was like, okay, I'll respect that. I'm just going to stand over there.
One of the most important parts of this chapter is when Big Mom reveals that the numbers are essentially failed experiments that Kaido got from Punk Hazard. And so we actually already knew that the government was using Punk Hazard as a facility to conduct unethical experiments on prisoners. Like, there's a moment in the arc where Chopper and Nami open up a freezer and find frozen giants that were failed experiments, but none of them had horns like the numbers do. So those were different. Plus, we also saw the numbers during the Oden flashback 20 years ago when the scabbards were running away. So Kaido got the numbers from Punk Hazard a long time ago. And this shot is just a shot of what Punk Hazard used to look like initially. But then later Caesar created a weapon and there was an explosion that contaminated everything. But the numbers were already gone by then. Now in the arc, we do see that the Onigashima / Ancient Giant logo is on the Punk Hazard entrance gate. So now we know exactly why that logo was there. Now, the fact that the numbers are failed experiments or failed versions of the original Ancient Giants is just crazy to me, because according to what we know, Kid at one point says that the numbers are already bigger than normal giants. And so I know this is pretty obvious, but that means that the Ancient Giant race must have been colossal in size, absolutely insane. Like, we're talking about continent pullers here like Oars, but even somebody like Oars to me would still be too small.
Actually, according to the official translation, Nami says that the numbers are the size of oars. So since the numbers were failed imitations of the ancient giants, and the numbers, according to Nami, are the same size as oars, then that means that the ancient giants were also bigger than oars.
And here's why, alright? If you look at the skull that the characters are in right now, Onigashima is able to fit Kaido, Big Mom, and all of the numbers inside, alright? And that's just the skull of this ancient giant. So think about that. The numbers, who are already bigger than giants, are able to stand up inside the skull, just the skull of this ancient giant. So imagine like how big the full body of this thing was. That's crazy. Now, back in Punk Hazard, there was only one race of natural giants, and these giants were the Yeti Cool brothers. Now, what's interesting about the Yeti Cool brothers is that when Brownbeard begins to describe them, all right, he gets cut off before he can reveal how old the two giants are. Now, if you read the manga, you'll find in that panel, he gets cut off and he says something like, they're 25 - years old or something like that. So it could be that the Yeti Cool brothers are actually 2,500 years old. And if that's the case, then that actually means that just like Sunisha, the Yeti Cool brothers were alive during the Void Century. And what's also interesting is that we actually never got to see the faces of the Yeti Cool brothers. They were always covered in shadow. Not only that, but both of them appear to be wearing straw hats. So if the two of them are actually 2,500 years old, then that must mean that they must have known who Joy Boy was if they lived that long ago. And so this can kind of act as support for a theory that I've seen floating around that states that maybe Joy Boy was in fact a giant. And that's why the hat that he left behind that is currently in Marijoa is that big, because he himself was a giant as well.
Now, Luffy is catapulting himself upward to get to Kaido, and the most random encounter happens where he runs into Zoro who is just casually standing right next to Queen. If you remember in my last review, I talked about how Oda does this intentional back and forth thing between Sanji and Zoro to keep their rivalry alive. So, for example, in the last chapter, it was like, oh, I'm going to show Sanji clashing with King, right? And then in this chapter, it's like, well, I'm going to make people think that Zoro is going up with Luffy to go fight Kaido. So it's this never-ending push and pull thing, right? And he does make it obvious in this chapter that Zoro is game to go with Luffy to fight Kaido. If I remember correctly, the whole Zoro fighting Kaido fan speculation started gaining a lot of traction once we found out that Kaido had the Dragon Zoan Devil Fruit, because Zoro had Shusui back then, and part of Ryuma's legacy, who was a famous samurai from Wano and who was the original owner of Shusui, was that he was able to cut a dragon. He sliced one up in the sky. So people were saying, oh, then Zoro has to fight a dragon. Kaido is a dragon, therefore Zoro has to fight Kaido, or has to injure Kaido to some degree. I dismissed that entirely because I thought, well, technically speaking, Zoro has already sliced up a dragon in Punk Hazard, right? I've always been pushing for Zoro to fight King. I think that's his ideal matchup for this arc. However, there are some things to consider. Oda has thrown a curveball with Sanji clashing with King and then Zoro wanting to go up with Luffy. So when Zoro got Enma, a lot of fans were enabled as well. So they were saying like, oh, since Enma is one of the only swords that was able to injure Kaido and Zoro is getting it, now it is a guarantee that Zoro will be doing something to Kaido. And I was not on board with that idea. But then you take a look of what's been happening, where you have these nudges, these hints of like Frankie being able to slam Big Mom with his motorcycle, Jinbe and Robin being able to roll out Big Mom like a bowling ball, Sanji clashing with King and tanking a direct attack from a first Yonko commander level character. You look at all of those things and you do begin to wonder, like, wait, should Zoro be up there alongside with Luffy, right? Trying to deal some damage to Kaido? Could Zoro actually be able to injure a Yonko? Now, here's the thing. We know that in order to break through Kaido's tough exterior, you have to be able to use Rio. So Luffy can use Rio, no problem. He trained to learn how to use it. The Scabbards were able to use Rio, and they actually did pierce through. And people were saying like, oh, it's because Kaido was emotionally triggered, emotionally vulnerable, because he got triggered by the Scabbards, right, into thinking about Odin and that very traumatic memory that he has about Odin being able to hurt him. And so that's what kind of like messed up his tough exterior, his defense, right? So if the Scabbards were able to trigger that vulnerability from Kaido because he got the memory of Odin, wouldn't Zoro having Enma, like wouldn't Kaido seeing Enma do the same thing? Like, wouldn't he be like, oh, that's the sword that got me? Suddenly, Zoro doing something to Kaido is not that crazy anymore. It's not that much of a stretch. Personally, I think it has to be one of two options. Either Zoro fights King, and it's a very difficult fight, but he ends up pushing through by the end, or he actually plays an important role in taking Kaido down. I don't want both to happen. I think that would just be way, way too much. Too broken. I'm the kind of guy that wants things to make sense. That's why we're here. I mean, I would hope that that's why we're here. And I don't see how you can explain the following scenario. Zoro's first difficult fight post time skip is him going up against a first Yonko commander, beating that first Yonko commander, and then going ahead and injuring a Yonko. That is way too much. If that were to happen, I do not know how Oda would begin to explain it without tarnishing, without making Luffy's development as a fighter look bad. Actually, an idea just popped into my head. How would you feel if Zoro got help taking down King, all right? He defeats King with help, and then he goes on to hurt Kaido. Because that's honestly the only way I can see Zoro getting his cake and eating it too. And as I mentioned previously in passing, Sanji gets his most impressive feat in the series thus far in this chapter, being able to withstand, being able to tank a direct attack from a first Yonko commander is super impressive, especially if you consider where he was in the beginning of the time skip where Virgo cracked his leg and then Dofi was about to KO him. So it's a huge leap durability-wise for Sanji, which durability has been one of Sanji's weakest stats. He has the speed, he has the observation haki. We saw that with Katakuri and him dodging the jelly bean. That is an observation haki and speed feat, right? He has the attack power. His attack power, from what I've seen, is okay. I remember in Dressrosa when he was fighting Dofi and Dofi was blocking his kicks. Dofi even said, like, this guy is strong. So the attack power is there, but the durability has been one of his weaknesses. And so the suit being able to offer that to him is going to be crucial for him as a fighter moving forward.
Now, to me, this chapter was just full of visual references to Fishman Island. The story kind of links back to Punk Hazard, but visually, I just got a lot of Fishman Island flashbacks. You know, everything from Frankie using his radical beam on that number, to Usopp and Chopper fanboying over General Frankie's docking, to Luffy stretching out his arms to try to get to the top, just like he wanted to get to the Noah back in Fishman Island to fight Hody Jones. And then, of course, the final panel of the Straw Hats together, which we haven't gotten a panel like that since Fishman Island. So everything kind of just links back. There's just so many visual cues to that arc here. And it's literally been around a decade since we've gotten a panel of the entire crew together looking battle ready. Sanji deactivates his raid suit because, of course, he doesn't like wearing it. Again, he still resists his Germa heritage. I talked about that a lot in the previous review. And then I do have a question. Did Kung Fu Chopper get bigger, or was he always that big? Because he looks bigger than I remember him being. Just look at how he's towering over Robin behind her there. He's as tall as Brook, actually, in that panel. Or maybe he's just standing on some of the rubble.
Also, I noticed that Jinbe is kind of taking Sanji's spot in that spread, because usually it's Luffy front and center and then Zoro and Sanji at his sides, but now there's Jinbe there. You know, because it's part of the new monster trio, or monster quartet.
Finally, I want to talk about the flying creatures that are seen blocking the sky, being led by King, because I do think that Oda was being intentional by not revealing what they actually were. Like, Sanji asks whether they're devil fruit users, so the most obvious answer is that they're probably gifters. However, since they are being led by King, and Big Mom has said that King is from an entirely different race, and since King has wings similar to those creatures that he's leading, I wonder if they can actually be members of King's race. Now, when I first saw them, I immediately thought of Monet from Punk Hazard, but Monet was actually a normal human. It's just that Law gave her those bird limbs, so that she ended up looking like a harpy. That being said, since we just found out that the numbers were experiments, I wonder if the flying creatures could also be experiments that Kaido got from Punk Hazard. You know, one of the things that we don't know is why King appears to be wearing a prison guard outfit similar to Shiryu's. Like, they both have the little skull pins on their suit and everything, so I wonder if King was ever a guard in Punk Hazard, and maybe he was in charge of escorting the prisoners that were being experimented on. And maybe that's how Kaido got King to join his crew, around the same time that he purchased the numbers.
That's going to do it for my review today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Again, the purpose of this chapter is to get you to feel comfortable, to get you to think that the Alliance has the upper hand and that everything is going to be okay. So expect a 180 very, very soon, all right, in Kaido's favor. You can follow me on Instagram if you want to. I'll just leave the name there. Thanks again. Like the video if you did. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. Take care. Catch you guys later. Bye.